Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances, dear devotees. It's a great fortune for me to again be here in Shri Radha Govindaji Mandir, the first temple that Srila Prabhupada established in India and where he personally resided and continues to reside. Srila Prabhupada told several of his disciples, devotees, that he continues to be personally present in his centers. Especially he mentioned his quarters in Vrindavan, Shri Radha Damodar. And he says, I am eternally present in those places. But Srila Prabhupada also explained that a pure devotee, a Paramahamsa like he, a liberated soul, is not limited by space or time. In Govinda Bhashyam of Baladev Vidyabhushana, Baladev Vidyabhushana explains that a liberated soul is capable of being present almost just like Krishna, in all places where his presence is needed. And he compares it to the effulgence or light of a candle. If a candle is lit somewhere in one place, then its effulgence, its light is spread across the room. In the same way, Baladev Vidyabhushana explains that pure devotees, residents of the spiritual world, can be present by their effulgence wherever they want. Thank you very much. And Srila Prabhupada also explained in a letter to one of his disciples, he said that Guru is not the body, he is a principle. He says in the letter to, I think, Malati Mataji. He says, and just like a transcendental, just like television can broadcast the same picture to millions of TV sets, in the same way a spiritual master can be present wherever his sincere disciples need his presence, be it in his Vani, which is the most accessible form of the spiritual master's presence, Vani. Srila Prabhupada even goes on to explain in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam that the word he uses is stick. If someone sticks to the instructions of the spiritual master regardless of circumstances, then this determination to follow the instructions of the spiritual master is, and he uses a fancy word, tantamount. Tantamount means equal in all, for all intents and purposes, for all practical results, equal to seeing Krishna face to face. He says, if someone sticks to the order of the spiritual master and follows his instructions, then he actually sees Krishna face to face. Tantamount means there is no difference between one state and the other. One state is being pratyakshatatmanatmana, seeing Krishna personally, which is supposed to be the highest perfection in spiritual life. Is it?
Not getting to hear it.
Well, I do, but there's only so much I can get closer to it. Prabhupada says once that microphones they work only when you insert them into the mouth. Like that. Sometimes. Because Prabhupada also had troubles with microphones occasionally. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna. Is it good? Is it better? Alright. Should I repeat whatever I have been saying all up until now? Anyhow, he says that this Srila Jiva Goswami explains that Sakshatkara, or the ability to see Krishna personally, face to face, when Krishna decides to manifest himself personally, is the highest perfection of spiritual life, the highest level of being recognized, Krishna's recognition. But Prabhupada explains that if one follows the instructions of the spiritual master, then that determination to follow his instructions is as good as seeing Krishna face to face. There is no difference. whatever you can get by seeing Krishna face to face, you get by following the instructions of the spiritual master, strictly. And then he goes on in the same commentary in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, he goes on to explain that this is the only secret to see Krishna personally. Instead of, and Prabhupada says, instead of trying to see Krishna in some bushes in Vrindavana, while holding on to one's sense gratification, if one sticks to the instructions of the spiritual master, then his spiritual life is already complete. He is already liberated, whether he or she know about it or not. So I started speaking about how this place is where Prabhupada resides, continues to reside, as long as his instructions are being followed by his devotees. And also the same could be said about the books. Even though now we are reading the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which of course Prabhupada didn't get to translate. He wanted to translate Srimad Bhagavatam in its entirety. Once he was speaking to his disciples and he said, interestingly, he said, my life is marked by cycles of 11 years. Prabhupada said, in year 2022, I met my Guru Maharaj in one Ultadanga Road. In year 1922, I met my Guru Maharaj for the first time. In the year 1933, what happened? 1933? Initiation. In the year 1944, I started my Back to Godhead. In the year 1955, I think Srila Prabhupada left home. From what I remember, I may be wrong, but he said. He took sannyas 55? Okay. In the year 1966, you all know what happens. ISKCON was established. And then Prabhupada paused and said, in the year 1977, Prabhupada said, his disciples said, oh, you'll finish your Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada said, let's see. Let's see what will happen in the year 1977. But just like Prabhupada continues to be present in his books, in his instructions, in his temples, in his deity form, in his beloved deities, as we know from the prayers of Bhishmadeva in the 1st canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhishmadeva says that one should focus one's attention on Krishna exclusively in the heart. But the Acharyas explain in that canto and also elsewhere, but when we focus our attention on Krishna in the heart, we all of a sudden discover that he is not alone. All the time, up until this time, we were trying to meditate on Krishna exclusively. But Krishna doesn't like to be seen exclusively. He likes to be surrounded by his devotees. He likes to be seen in terms of his relationship with his devotees. Just like the Brahmapatnis, when they came running to Krishna with, what did they carry? The Brahmapatnis, the wives of the Brahmanas, Yogic Brahmanas, when they were told by the cowherd boys, Krishna and Balaram are very hungry. Even though Krishna forbade them, don't tell them that I'm hungry, because they'll get scared and they'll get depressed. Don't tell them. Tell them that you're hungry. Let them feed you. But devotees of Krishna, especially devotees in Sakya Rasa, they have that freedom of doing things their own way. They sometimes don't care what Krishna tells them. They know what Krishna wants. They can read between the lines. Sometimes they act in a completely contrary way to what Krishna tells them to do. Just like he told them, Krishna told them, don't tell them that we are hungry. They'll become very upset, like mothers. If your mothers are told, oh, that devotee, such a nice devotee, stays in the Shishirada Govinda temple, but he's always hungry. Or the mothers will come, the next flight or the next train, she'll come and bring prasadam to feed you, right? So the Brahmanis, they heard that Krishna and Balaram were hungry, and they immediately ran to that place, carrying all the food stuff they could get in their household. And even though their husbands, their fathers, their brothers, and their sons, Nishedamana, Patibir, Bratribir, I forget, they all stood in their path, blocking their way. But they were compared to Nimnaga, the rivers that always have a way to circumvent all the obstacles. And they came to Krishna carrying all that food in their hands. But who did they see? When they saw Krishna and Balaram, there is a wonderful description in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It says, Shyamam hiranya paridhim vanamalya barha dhatum pravananata veshanu vratamse vinyastahastam itarena dunanam amjam karnot palolaka kapolo mukhabjahasam. There is a description of how Krishna and Balaram, they stood there, and Krishna was dressed in his yellow garments, Shyama, colored as the monsoon cloud, with his glittering hiranya paridhim, in his dress which glittered like lightning. Vanamalya barha datu pravala natavesha, and he had a very long garland reaching his knees, and he was decorated with different berries and flowers and different minerals. But then an interesting thing is that he was leaning on the shoulder of his friend, like that. In a very casual way, he stood there. And in another hand, he held a lotus flower, and he was just spinning it like that. What do you call, people sometimes use these things for fidgeting. What do you call them? The spinners. Because they want to engage themselves and they want to fidget something, like some spinners or some other things that they fidget in their hands. So Krishna was spinning a lotus flower, waiting anxiously for the Brahmanis to come. So the point is that when we focus our attention on Krishna, we discover that Krishna is present with his eternal associates and his dear devotees. So Srila Prabhupada is present wherever his beloved deities are and his disciples. And also the same could be said about the books that Srila Prabhupada didn't get to translate himself personally, but he empowered his disciples to continue his work, his literary work. Srila Jiva Goswami gives a wonderful explanation in Tattva Sandarbha. He says, Puranas are named Puranas because they fulfill the unfulfilled message of the Vedas. And he gave a nice example, just like a bracelet. If a bracelet is made of gold, but it's missing a couple of links, then those links cannot be made of lead or iron, and they can only be made of gold if it's a golden bracelet. In the same way, he uses that logic. If Purana fulfills the purpose of the Vedas, then they belong to the same transcendental category. In the same way, Srila Prabhupada entrusted his literary work of Srimad Bhagavatam, his principal, main mission of life, to some of his disciples, and they successfully carried out his work and provided wonderful translations and commentaries on these verses. I heard from Gopi Paranandana Prabhu, who was one of the translators after Prabhupada's departure, that sometimes they would have to go to India, to the libraries, in search for the manuscripts, and those manuscripts were preserved on microfilms, they call them. Very tiny script, and you had to use a special equipment, almost like a microscope, to see what's written there. They're not available. But once that equipment broke, the lamp burned, and they couldn't get another replacement. In India, it was very hard, and they had to send away for that lamp somewhere abroad. But it would take a long time for the lamp, to the spare part, to arrive. So they actually had to use a microscope. They purchased a microscope in the medical store, and they used the microscope to read the verses of the commentaries of the acharyas on the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, so they could continue this work. So now we are reading. Sorry for this long introduction. I just felt inspired to remind myself of how dear this place is to Srila Prabhupada. He is eternally present here, as well as in many other places in Kolkata, in his birth site, in Toliganji. And then one Ultadanga Road, he's definitely present there. He's present here. He's present in the hearts and minds of those devotees who meditate on his pleasure. And this way Prabhupada's presence is spread around the world. Krishna glorifies in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam when he delivered Manigriva and Nalakuvara when they came out of their 3 bodies and stood in front of Krishna. Krishna told them, "It's not me who liberated you. Narada Muni, he liberated you, and he said that my devotees, just like Narada Muni, they are compared to the sun. Just like the sun illuminates everything by its rays, in the same way whoever is face to face with my devotee can never remain in darkness. And in the same way, whoever is face to face with Srila Prabhupada in the form of his lectures, his books, his instructions, his devotees, his mission, can never be in the darkness of ignorance. And as soon as we deviate from those words and those missions and those instructions, we immediately become plunged in the darkness of ignorance. And there is nothing in this world that can dissipate the darkness. Nothing. We cannot replace Prabhupada with any other, with all due respect, sources of spiritual knowledge, with any other sadhus, with any other missions, with any other great souls or sannyasis or acharyas even. Even the great acharyas of the past. Not that they are incapable of dissipating darkness, but they don't want to. They have already given us Srila Prabhupada as their plenipotentiary representative, and trying to circumvent Prabhupada to go directly to them, in their eyes, is offensive. Prabhupada himself explains that in so many times, in so many places, when he said that all the acharyas have empowered his commentaries so they could be present and they could deliver their message to us the way they want, through his words. So, with this preface, we'll read a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Actually, we have 3 verses to read from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Texts 34 and 35, I'll read myself, and then we'll read together verse 36 in a short commentary written to that verse by Prabhupada's disciples. Again, in their commentary, in their purport, they quote Prabhupada profusely. And so even there, Prabhupada is present in the words of his disciples. So I'll chant the verses 34 and 35 myself. Shout Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritya Naram Chavanarottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat Nashta Prayesha Bhadrasho Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavat Suttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Shishya Govinda Ki Jai. Ashaucha Macha Manam Snanam Sandhyopastir Mamarchanam Tirtha Seva Japos Prishya Bhakshya Sambhashya Varjanam Samva. It's a bit difficult to see. Sarvashama Prayuktoyam Niyamam Kulanandana Madbhava Sarva Bhuteshu Manavakaya Samyamaha. Translation. My dear Uddhava, general cleanliness, washing the hands, bathing, performing religious services at sunrise, noon and sunset, worshipping me, visiting holy places, chanting japa, avoiding that which is untouchable, uneatable, and not to be discussed, and remembering my existence within all living entities as the Super Soul. These principles should be followed by all members of society through regulation of the mind, words, and body. Now, text 36, we can chant together. Evam brihad vratadharo. Evam brihad vratadharo. Brahmano gnirivajvalan. Brahmano gnirivajvalan. Madbhaktas vratapasa. Madbhaktas vratapasa. Dagdha karma shayo mala. Dagdha karma shayo mala. Translation and purport by disciples of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. A Brahmana observing the great vow of celibacy becomes brilliant like fire, and by serious austerity burns to ashes the propensity to perform material activities. Free from the contamination of material desire, he becomes my devotee. Purport. The process of liberation is described in this verse. Once when Srila Prabhupada was traveling by airplane, a fellow passenger, who happened to be a priest, told him that he had seen his disciples and found them, quote, bright-faced, unquote. Srila Prabhupada was fond of relating this incident. Yeah, oftentimes I listen to Prabhupada's classes and he sometimes, quite often, refers to this incident. He said, I was traveling by an airplane and a priest told me, oh, your disciples are so bright-faced. What's the secret of them being so bright? Srila Prabhupada was fond of relating this incident. The spirit soul is more brilliant than the sun, and as the process of spiritual purification gradually takes effect, even the external form of a devotee becomes effulgent. The glowing fire of spiritual knowledge burns to ashes the mentality of sense gratification, and one naturally becomes austere and disinterested in mundane enjoyment. Among all austerities, the best is celibacy, by which the shackles of material life immediately become slackened. One who is amala, free from material desire, is known as a pure devotee of the Lord. On the paths of jnana, karma, and yoga, the mind retains the concept of personal interest, but on the path of pure devotion, the mind is trained to see only the interests of the personality of Godhead. Thus, a pure devotee of the Lord is amala, completely pure. I'll read the verses again. Shauchamachamanam snanam sandhyopastir amarchanam tirthaseva japo sprishya bhakshya sambhakshya varjanam sarvashama prayuktoyam yiyama kulanandana madbhakta sarva bhuteshu manovak kaya samyamaha. Translation: My dear Uddhava, general cleanliness, washing the hands, bathing, performing religious services at sunrise, moon and sunset, worshipping me, visiting holy places, chanting japa, avoiding that which is untouchable, uneatable and not to be discussed, and remembering my existence within all living entities as the super soul. These principles should be followed by all members of society through regulation of the mind, words and body. And Evam brihadvrata dharo brahmano gnir iva jvalan madbhaktas tivra tapasa dagda karma shayo malaha. A Brahmana observing the great vow of celibacy becomes brilliant like fire, and by serious austerity burns to ashes the propensity to perform material activities. Free from the contamination of material desire, he becomes my devotee. Om Agyanati Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksharam Miritam Yana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swami Avantikam Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityananda Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharya Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Desha Tarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Kankaroti Vachanam Bhagavamangayati Girim Yankripatamaham Bhande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. Lord Krishna is wrapping up his instructions to Uddhava. There are still a few chapters to go, but Uddhava playing the role of a conditioned soul, just like Arjuna did on the battle of Kurukshetra. Both are liberated souls, both are very, very dear servants and friends of Krishna. They don't need these instructions for themselves, but they play convincingly a role of a conditioned soul, so Krishna could take it as an excuse to give instructions through them to the whole world. After Krishna finishes his instructions to Uddhava, he actually will send him on a mission. Uddhava wants to leave this world with Krishna, before Krishna actually, just like so many devotees want. Like Haridas Thakur, he wanted to leave this world before Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Lord Chaitanya granted his desire. But in Uddhava's case, Krishna told him, Uddhava, I have a special mission for you. my 125 years of presence in this world are coming to a close. I have to leave this world, and but there are some other personalities who haven't been able to see me in person, and for their sake I want you to stay. By my personal association you have become almost like me in all respects, so much that Dvarakavasis, when they saw Uddhava, they thought it was Krishna, because even though he was born in a Brahmana family with a fair white complexion, but by his personal association with Krishna he became as Shyama, as Krishna. Not only that, but Uddhava, Твое паюкта срагангха васоланкара чарчита хучишта боджина дасас того маем джаямахик. Uddhava tells Krishna in the 11th canto Bhagavatam, he says, I am, as a devotee, I'm trying to surround myself with your presence as much as I can, and I do that by wearing your clothes. And Uddhava apparently wore Krishna's clothes. Tvaya payukta sragandha vaso. Vaso means clothes. Sraka means garlands. I wear your garlands. Gandha, I use the same perfume as Krishna used, the same scented oils. Krishna had a very special fragrance around him. It's called Chatuksama. It's a mixture of 4 ingredients: sandal, camphor, musk, and aguru in a certain proportion. Actually, one devotee made a perfume according to that formula described in Chaitanya Charitamrita of these 4 ingredients, and the fragrance is mind-blowing. Even these material ingredients, not to speak of Krishna's spiritual fragrance, but when you combine these material ingredients in the right ratio, right proportion, the effect is mind-blowing. You cannot stop thinking about that fragrance. So Uddhava used that fragrance used by Krishna. Vaso, clothes, alankara, decorations, charchita, uchishta, bhojana dasas, and I also eat food remnants from Krishna's personal plate. And this way we hope to become shielded or protected from Maya. So Uddhava became, you could say, a complete replica, just like some politicians have body doubles sometimes, and they send their body doubles to missions which are dangerous for themselves personally. But in Krishna's and Uddhava's case, Uddhava became permeated or saturated with Krishna's presence, so that association with him was as good as association with Krishna personally. The Dvarakavasis, when they saw Uddhava from a distance, they started running towards him. But when they would come up close, they could see by some signs that he was Uddhava, not Krishna, but they were not upset. Because association with Uddhava was even more precious in some ways than association with Krishna, because Uddhava could give devotion to Krishna. So Krishna was just about to leave this world, and then he gave this knowledge in a nutshell to Uddhava, so Uddhava could stay, and he could go to different places and give Krishna's presence through his instructions to those who were not fortunate to see Krishna personally. And one of those personalities, or actually 2, were Nara-Narayana Rishi. Up in the Himalayas, Krishna specifically told Uddhava, I didn't get to go to the Himalayas. Somehow I was too busy. And could you please go on my behalf and give that letter to Nara-Narayana Rishi? And Nara-Narayana Rishi gave a letter to them saying, my dear Nara-Narayana Rishi, please accept my blessings. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Krishna must have written or something like that. So here's Uddhava, and you can associate with him, and you can get all your desires fulfilled by his association, like that. So that's why Krishna goes back to the basics of spiritual science. In the preceding chapters he speaks about Atma Gyan. Krishna explains what the soul is, he describes the modes of material nature, just like in the Bhagavad Gita. And here it describes the Varnasrama system. Again, interestingly, it's something irrelevant, you could say, for liberated souls. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he spoke with Ramananda Rai, and he was trying to get from Ramananda Rai the essence of all knowledge, and Ramananda Rai would offer one verse after another. And the first verse he offered was what? Varnasrama charavata purushena parah paman Vishnu radyate. He said, Varnasrama is the highest level of transcendental knowledge, the highest level of instructions to humankind. And Lord Chaitanya said what? He didn't reject it. He said, Eha Bhakya, this is external. go deeper. He doesn't say go elsewhere, and go deeper. This is the upper layer, go deeper. And then he said, okay, offering your results to Krishna, go deeper. Rejecting all duties, go deeper. And then he was going on and on and on. Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharana. Even that verse, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't favor as the most essential. What was the turning point in that discussion was when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard Gyane prayasam udapasya manta eva jivanti sanmukoritam bhavadiya varta. He said, oh, that's it. Just hear about Krishna in the association of pure devotees, and this way you can conquer Krishna's body, Krishna's mind, and Krishna's words by your body, mind, and words. Like that. By engaging your body, mind, and words in hearing about Krishna. Acharyas give multiple explanations of this verse from different angles of vision. Interestingly, he says, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that how does it? So they explain Tanuvan Manobar means in application to non-devotees, they can never conquer Krishna with their mind, with their body, with their words. The words and the body and the mind of non-devotees cannot grasp Krishna. They come back from trying to achieve Krishna ashamed and frustrated. But in the devotee's case, and who is a devotee? Again, it's an important. Why Lord Chaitanya singled out that verse and he said, okay, now that's the essence. Go on the same topic more and more. Because the devotee is described here as someone who decides to set aside all other priorities in life and cut out some quality time to come to a place where devotees congregate, where they sit together and hear about Krishna. And those devotees, even though they might not be jnanis, or might not be yogis, might not be karmis, yogis, and jnanis are proficient in using their body, mind, or intelligence. And they're trying to use those faculties as instruments for understanding the Supreme Absolute Truth. But the pure devotee, simple devotee who just comes to listen about Krishna in the association of other devotees, just by that act alone, he or she are able to conquer Krishna's mind, Krishna's body, and Krishna's words. How does that happen? What does that mean? And that means that Krishna starts thinking about these devotees who hear about him from Srimad Bhagavatam. It means that Krishna glorifies his devotees. And Prabhupada just recently, yesterday, I was listening to his class and he explained an important point. How does Krishna glorify his devotees? Because oftentimes he speaks in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, he has Mad Bhakti, Mad Ashraya, etc. He uses that word Mad, which means me. But Prabhupada says Krishna is very clever. Krishna likes a very kind of indirect way of expressing himself. Paroksha Vadarishaya, Paroksha Mamacha Priyam. He likes to put a twist on words. So no one can understand what he means to say except his devotees. When Krishna speaks, Prabhupada explains, Mad Ashraya, he means, the literal meaning means take shelter of me, but the indirect meaning, the deeper meaning means take shelter of mine, of my devotees. Mad means mine, those who belong to me. Mad Ashraya means take shelter of my devotees, not of me directly. And then when he speaks, says Mad Bhakti, that means what? Bhakti to me, the literal translation, but the deeper translation means Bhakti to my bhaktas. As he himself, Krishna is known as Bhagavan Bhakta Bhaktiman. He is the Bhakta of his Bhakta, Bhakta of his bhaktas. He is the one who has Bhakti for his devotees. Bhagavan Bhakta Bhaktiman. Like that. So, Lord Chaitanya became very happy and he says, okay, go on reciting, go along the same lines. Everything grows out of there. Whatever else Lord Chaitanya starts hearing from Ramananda Rai, the glories of Dasya Rasa, the glories of Sakya Rasa, the glories of Vatsalya Rasa, the glories of Madhurya Rasa, everything sprouts, grows out of that root, of that single verse. Just go to the place where devotees sit and listen from them Srimad Bhagavatam. In this way Krishna becomes completely subordinate. Jita, Ajita, he becomes Jita. Unconquerable becomes conquered. There is another verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 6th canto, a wonderful verse. It's a very unusual meter because each line in that verse has a different number of syllables. Usually we have the same number of syllables, like this verse has 8 number of syllables. But that verse is completely like haphazardly composed. Ajita jita samamati bir sadobir bhavan jitatmabir bhavata. Chitraketu Maharaj speaks in his anxiety, and he speaks in a very unusual meter. Ajita jita samamati bir sadobir bhavan jitatmabir bhavata. Vijitas tepicha bhajatam akamatmanaya atmadoti karuna. In the 6th canto of Bhagavatam he says, you are Ajita, unconquerable, but you become Jita, you become conquered. By those who have conquered their senses, their mind, and those who display equal vision to all living entities, and those who become your devotees. You unconquered, you become conquered. And by surrendering to your devotees, you conquer them. It's interesting. Like in the material world, everyone wants to conquer the other parties, subjugate, excel, and maybe defame. Sometimes they resort to different means to emerge victorious, emerge most important, most prominent. But in the spiritual world, the dynamics is entirely different. Srila Prabhupada explains in the commentary on that 6th verse, on the verse in the 6th canto, he says, Krishna, by surrendering to his devotees, he conquers them. And devotees, by surrendering to Krishna, conquer him. In this way, there is a competition, but of entirely different nature. Not like in material world trying to excel each other. In the spiritual world, everyone is trying to subordinate to the other party. And that's how they conquer. Like that. So, in this verse, well, we just already almost finished, exhausted our time. I should leave some time for questions. And probably one of the questions would be, what about today's verse? And the Varnasrama Dharma we're describing, that Varnasrama Dharma, Lord Krishna goes back to the description, so Uddhava could introduce that knowledge, keep it and give it to the proper recipients. But also another important reason why Krishna gives lessons on Varnasrama Dharma, lessons on Atma-jnana, he also gives lessons on what? On mystic yoga. He gives lessons on so many different, on deity worship. Whichever topic Krishna chooses to speak, he speaks about Sankhya, he speaks about the elements of material nature, he speaks about the 3 modes of material nature. He covers so many, you could say, non-essential topics just before his departure. Why? Interestingly, because in each and every topic that Krishna discusses, he always introduces himself as the ultimate goal of all pursuits of knowledge. He shows how only by surrendering to him the modes of material nature can be conquered. He shows how he himself created the material elements and how they all go back into his body. He shows how, interestingly, when he describes Atma-jnana in the 11th chapter of the 11th canto, he says, the soul can never be conditioned and the soul can never be liberated. Both conditioned and liberated states of the soul are just like a dream. But they belong to me, and by serving me, they become liberated. That's the liberated position. So Krishna always introduces himself as the final level, final word in all spheres of knowledge. In the same way, Varnasrama Dharma, Krishna speaks about the duties of Varnasrama, but here he speaks about Brahman observing the great vow of celibacy, performing austerities, becoming fire, like fire, blazing or brilliant like the fire. But then what does Krishna say? If Brahmana continues doing his proper duties for some time, maybe for a few years. Srila Prabhupada once was in Vrindavan, and he brought his disciples. I think it was one of the first times he brought his disciples to Vrindavan. And his disciples started going here and there, meeting the Vrajabasis and local Brahmanas and local Mahantas or Pujaris of the temple. And they once came running to Prabhupada saying, this Pujari of a particular temple, he told us, oh, you're such nice devotees. If you continue doing your service nicely, next lifetime you'll be born as a Brahman in our family. And devotees became upset. They came to Prabhupada and said, what do we do with this? Is it true? And Prabhupada left. And he told them a story. There was one old lady in a village. And that old lady, she had a small plot of land, but some greedy, local landlord, encroached on her land and took it away because she was an old lady and she didn't know how to fight. So the governor of the place, the governor of that state, happened to be visiting the place, and she complained to him. And when the governor heard about the problem of that old lady, her plight, he immediately restored justice and he punished that greedy landlord and gave her land back. And the old lady became so happy, and she came to that governor and she extended her palm in a blessing gesture and said, "My dear son, I'm so grateful to you. You helped me so much. I bless you. So next lifetime you become like a policeman in our village." Because everyone is afraid of the policeman. I think he is the most important person in the creation. So he blessed the governor. "I bless you, so you become the policeman in my village." And Prabhupada told this story. Said, "These are the brahmanas. They bless you to become brahmanas next lifetime. They don't understand that your position is already higher than the brahmana." And that's what Lord Krishna says. After performing for so many lifetimes, for so many years, his austerity as a brahmana becomes brilliant like fire, and he burns to ashes all his material desires, and then he becomes my devotee, Mad Bhaktim Labhate Param. And Srila Prabhupada explains, quoting that famous verse by Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, "Bahunam janmanam ante gyanaman mam prapadyate vasudeva sarvamati." What? Sudurlabha. Sudurlabha, what does it mean, Sudurlabha? Very rare. Sudurlabha, very difficult to find, Sudurlabha. And Prabhupada quoted that verse and he said, interesting, I was just mentioning how devotees in Sakya Rasa sometimes challenge Krishna, sometimes don't agree with him. Right? And Prabhupada in his class says, Krishna says, very rare, but actually it's not rare. We make Mahatmas very, his words, cheaply in ISKCON, very easily. He says, Bahunam Janmanamante, not Bahunam Janmanamante, just a few minutes. Vasudeva Saramamati, even that is not required. What is required? Just take some prasadam, participate in the kirtan, read a few books, a few pages, one verse. I know one devotee in the West who was on his way to his work. He was an IT specialist. And he had a family, still has. And he had children. And he was a very nice, very successful professor of IT technology, in his university. And he was on the way to work. So he was a professor, a teacher, he was a father, and he was a husband. And one devotee happened to be on his path, and he offered him a book. It was the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. He didn't know anything, but the picture on the cover was a man, a dying man looking at a deer for some reason. So he was very polite, he didn't want to reject the offer, but he didn't want to buy the book. And the devotee told him, okay, just read it, this is one verse. And the person opened the book at random, and he looked at the verse, and the verse said, one cannot be a teacher, a husband, or a father, if he cannot liberate his dependence from birth and death, from death. Gorodna sasyat svajanona sasyat, right? And I was like, he was struck like thunder. All his roles in life became completely useless just by a few words read in that book by Srila Prabhupada. See, I'm a father, I'm a teacher, and I'm a husband, and I cannot liberate my dependence from death. So this book probably speaks right to me, to my heart, and he purchased the book and became a devotee like that. So Prabhupada said, it's not that. Lord Krishna speaks so many lifetimes, and one has to get knowledge, and such a great soul is very rare. That's wrong. It's not like that, it's incorrect. We make Mahatmas very cheaply, like that, in ISKCON. So that's how Srila Prabhupada sometimes, you could say, not challenges, but fulfills the inner desires of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. So this verse speaks about a Brahmana who has performed austerities for many lifetimes, and then he becomes my devotee. But Srila Prabhupada explains in his famous talk on Varnasrama Dharma in 1977 or 78, or 76, excuse me. He says, a Kanishka Adhikari in ISKCON is higher than a Brahmana, any Brahmana. Just being a Kanishka Adhikari means just a Bhakta who chants Hare Krishna, follows the principles and reads the Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam. He is higher than a Brahmana because he has already received all the results of Brahminical qualifications, Brahminical austerities in the previous lifetimes. What's the verse Devahuti speaks in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam? Te prusta praste juhovuk sasnurarya brahmana charnama grinantiyate. Those who chant my holy name, chant your holy name, Devahuti tells Kapila Dev, have already performed austerities, have already visited the holy places, have taken bath in the holy rivers, they have developed all good qualities and have performed all sacrifices. So they have already succeeded, Hare Krishna. I think I broke the microphone. Yes, I broke the microphone. Maybe we should stop here before I break anything else. That's it. Hare Krishna. We have only 3 minutes left, and I have requested for this book to be brought only because I wanted to share with you, dear devotees, how, speaking of Varnasrama, how Prabhupada wanted Varnasrama established. These are the final words of His Divine Grace. Actually, there's a video of him lying down on his bed in Vrindavan, dictating these very words. I saw the video called The Final Lesson. And these very words Prabhupada is dictating on the video. His microphone is put right against his lips, and his words have to be subtitled because it's very hard to understand what Prabhupada is saying in a very faint voice. But that's what he says. And I'll finish at this. Because we're talking about Varnasrama Dharma. Lord Krishna explains it to Uddhava, but this is how Prabhupada explains the importance of Varnasrama Dharma and how it should be established. And I'll finish at this. Prabhupada says, this is the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 13, verse 53. Prabhupada says, Varnasrama Dharma, therefore, I have to start a bit earlier. We should gradually, because the two verses we read, the first two verses spoke about the importance of one's purification. Prabhupada explains how this purification is attained. We should gradually come to the sattva guna so that we may avoid the two lower gunas. This can be done if we regularly discuss Srimad Bhagavatam and hear about Krishna's activities. Nashta prayesha badrishu nityam bhagavata sevaya. All the activities of Krishna described in Srimad Bhagavatam, beginning even with the pastimes concerning Putana, are transcendental. Therefore, by hearing and discussing Srimad Bhagavatam, the Raja Guna and Tama Guna are subdued, and that only Sattva Guna remains. Then Rajoguna and Tama Guna cannot do us any harm. Varnasrama Dharma, therefore, is essential, for it can bring people to Sattva Guna. Tada Rajastamo Bhava Karma Lobadayaschaye. Tamaguna and Rajaguna increase lust and greed, which implicate a living entity in such a way that he must exist in the material world for many, many forms. That is very dangerous. One should therefore be brought to Sattva Guna by the establishment of Varnasrama Dharma, and should develop Brahminical qualifications of having or being very neat and clean, rising early in the morning and seeing mangala-arati, and so on. In this way, one should stay in Sattva Guna, and then one cannot be influenced by Tamaguna and Rajaguna. So this is how Prabhupada explains we should maintain Sattva Guna. Rising early in the morning, seeing mangala-arati, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, and performing Radha Krishna Bhajana. He continues, the opportunity for this purification is a special feature of human life. In other lives, this is not possible. Such purification can be achieved very easily by Radha Krishna Bhajana, devotional service rendered to Radha and Krishna, or Radha and Govinda. And therefore Narottam Das Thakur sings Hari Hari Bifale Janama Gunainu, indicating that unless one worships Radha Krishna, one's human form of life is wasted. Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janaya Shashu Vairagyam. By engagement in the service of Vasudeva, one very quickly renounces material life. The members of the Hare Krishna movement, Krishna consciousness movement, for example, being engaged in Vasudeva Bhakti, very quickly come to the stage of being nice Vaishnavas. So much so that people are surprised that Mlechas and Yavanas are able to come to this stage. This is possible by Vasudeva Bhakti. But if we do not come to the stage of Sattva Guna in this human life, then, as Narottam Das Thakur sings, Hari Hari Bifale Janama Gunayana, there is no profit in gaining this human form of life. So this is the end of this passage that I wanted to share with you, and this is the end of our class today. I don't think we have any time for questions or comments. Huh? 10 questions, okay. Radha Raman Prabhu tells me that I can ask if there's any question, but there should be questions. What is there to ask about? Prabhupada's words are very clear. In his one of his lectures on the first canto of Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada says, as soon as you take to devotional service, death is no more death, no more death. Simply formality. And you're already liberated. Already liberated. He repeats several times. You're already liberated. You're already on the threshold of deathlessness, immortality. You close your eyes here, Prabhupada says, and you open your eyes in the spiritual world and you say, oh, I am with Krishna, immediately. And then Prabhupada says, do not spoil anything, please. Do not spoil anything. Everything is given to you. Just follow the principles, chant Hare Krishna, follow sadhana bhakti, come to mangala-arati. He describes deathlessness and return to the spiritual world is guaranteed to you, is guaranteed. I guarantee that to you. Please do not spoil anything. Do not do anything wrong. And he said, oh, okay, I promise to follow principles, chant. Okay, but let me break. Don't do that. Don't do that, Prabhupada repeats. Like every word he repeats twice. Don't do that. Don't make this mistake. Like that. Anyway, is there any question? Yes.
This regarding the last this
passage.
Right. So Prabhupada says here that performance of devotional service by doing mangala-arati, we remain in sattva. So my question is that why then it tells to establish Varnasrama? Because by itself doing devotional service,
well, it's a very good question. Thank you very much. The question was, why does Prabhupada explain and ask us to establish Varnasrama Dharma? He explains it in his famous walks, morning walks in Vrindavan, 1976, I think, or 74. There's a series of walks called Varnasrama College walks, morning walks. And he explains there that devotees maintain their transcendental position by sadhana bhakti. And sadhana bhakti necessarily implies being clean and neat, because otherwise Krishna won't accept offerings. He won't accept our devotional service if we're not clean. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains in his commentary on Patram Pushpam Palam Toyam Yomi Bhaktya Prayachhati Tadaham Bhaktu Pakritam Ashrami Prayatat Manaha. Krishna repeats 3 times, and one should be with bhakti and clean soul. And Acharya explains that Prayatat Manaha means even if a devotee is a pure devotee, but if he deliberately violates principles of cleanliness in offering Krishna his service, then Krishna will not accept it, because he'll see it as an offense, right? So Prabhupada explains in those talks that devotees maintain their transcendental position, but being very neat and clean, and most importantly by doing devotional service and sankirtana, and then they play roles externally as brahmanas, kshatriyas, vaishyas and shudras, so they could show the other people how to properly execute their roles in the material life. So they could have some role models like brahmanas and kshatriyas, played by devotees. And Prabhupada explains in those talks that devotees are like actors on the stage in a theatrical performance. They play different roles on the stage, and then they finish the play and they go back to their proper roles of devotees. And their roles of kshatriyas, brahmanas, vaishyas and shudras should never be associated, identified with the devotees themselves. And Prabhupada says, quoting his own example, he says, I can brush your shoes, and I can wash the floor very nicely, but I don't become a floor washer, I don't become a shoe polisher. It's just a role I show you. Sometimes I do teach you, do like that. And he says, never ever consider a devotee to be belonging to any of these varnas. Always remember, devotees are transcendental, but they perform activities externally, so that they show the example to the people who need that example, who haven't come up to the level of devotional service yet. So that's why we have these two parts of Varnasrama Dharma. Devotees playing the roles of Varnas to show the example of proper Varnasrama Dharma to the rest of the world. So they could see these examples and try to follow them in their own capacity. Like that. That's how Prabhupada explains it, at least in those talks. That's why he did say that Varnasrama is an unfulfilled part of his mission, but he also explained that devotees should always be seen as devotees and never identified with the roles they play. Like that. Actually, the borderline between Varnasrama or dependence on Varnasrama as such and transcendental realm again is explained by Prabhupada and the Acharyas as that famous verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam in 11th canto. Krishna says, Yavan karmani kurvita nani rudeta yavata mat katha shavanadavav. He says, as long as one hasn't developed faith in chanting and hearing about me, as long as he hasn't developed satiation, means he's fed up with material activities, he should follow Varnasrama Dharma, he should follow these secondary rules. But as soon as one develops faith in hearing and chanting about Krishna, as soon as he becomes disinterested in material sense gratification, then he should follow the other set of rules, a higher set of rules. And the Acharyas explain, as well as Prabhupada, that not following this instruction of Krishna by itself is an offense. In other words, if devotees have already developed faith in chanting and hearing about Krishna, but they try to base their spiritual upliftment or progress on the previous stage of Varnasrama Dharma, that's an offense. Sanatana Goswami, Rupa Goswami, and Jiva Goswami, and Vishwanath Chakravarti, they all explain that person this way, as the borderline, cut-off line between Varnasrama and transcendental service. That's why devotees in the previous, relatively recent past, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, they emphasized Vaishnavas transcendental. Vaishnavas, when they would come to when they would come to devotional service, they would have their Brahmana threads taken off and their insignia of Varnas taken off to show that they're already transcendental. It was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur who started, or Bhaktivinoda Thakur also started putting the Brahmana threads on to Vaishnavas again to show they're already Brahmanas. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says calling a Vaishnava a Brahmana is a contradiction. It's just like his example is just like calling a pot a golden clay pot. One man wanted to make a pot of gold. He took a piece of gold and brought it to the jeweler. And the jeweler was very sneaky and a shifty guy. And he pocketed most of the gold and he made a clay pot. And he covered that pot with gold on the outside. And the customer came to him to get his golden pot, and he got that. He could wait. He could see it's not gold, but it looked like gold. And he asked the jeweler, "What is this? This is clay pot." He said, "No. This is not clay pot. This is golden clay pot." And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said that calling a Vaishnava Brahmana is as inconsistent, internally contradictory as calling a pot golden clay pot. It's one or the other, right? Like that. So I hope it answers your question, at least to some extent. So we should strive to show a proper example to people, how to be proper Vaishnavas and serving Krishna in different capacities. Those capacities might be externally called as Vaishya capacities, or Shudra capacities, or Brahmana capacities, or Kshatriya capacities. But for devotees, they are interchangeable. Like Prabhupada himself, who was he by Varna? The very question is offensive. He's beyond Varna, even though he was born in a Vaishya family, Suvarna Vanik, in Udarna Datta's lineage. Right? But Prabhupada, was he manager? He was. Was he fighter? He was. Was he Brahmana par excellence? Was he Vaishya? We don't say he was not Vaishya, but he was acting as a very shrewd, very successful, and very intelligent businessman who couldn't be outsmarted. Was he doing something very menial like cleaning and washing and serving all of that? Why? Because he's none of those. Gopi Bhartur Pada Kamalayar Dasa Dasa Nadasa. Whatever is required for serving Krishna, that's what he would do. when he was giving sannyasa initiation to Tamal Krishna Maharaj and gave him that Gopi Bhava mantra, the sannyasis get that Gopi Bhava mantra, special secret mantra. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj asked him, so what I'm supposed to meditate upon, chanting that Gopi Bhava mantra? What is the purpose for a sannyasi? And Prabhupada said, Gopi Bhava means doing whatever necessary for Krishna. That's Gopi Bhava. And that's what Prabhupada himself was doing, and that's what his disciples should do. And we could show the rest of the world how to properly execute these principles. For Kshatriya, that means selfless, very honest, transparent, fearless. For Brahmana, also selfless and charitable and very simple and poor sometimes. For Vaishya, very generous and entrepreneurial. For Shudra, very loyal and very honest. All these principles described here in the 11th canto, also in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Vaishnavas should become role models based on their connection with Krishna and connection with Harinama Sankirtana. That's the only source of our ability to show the world what Varnasrama Dharma is. If we lose that, we lose everything. We won't be able to show anything to anyone, including ourselves. I hope it answers your question. I think we have to stop here. Thank you so very much. And please forgive me for taking more time than I was allowed to. And again, thank you for the opportunity to be here in this wonderful place. Whenever I see Shri Radha Govindaji and Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, I think my life becomes successful. I have a friend in Moscow. He came to this temple once in 1996 or 7, and he fell in love with Radha Govinda. And now, 30 years later, whenever I am in this temple, I will always send him a picture of Radha Govinda, and he will always thank me profusely. Thank you very much. These are my favorite deities. Krishna is so cute. Krishna is very cute and very attractive. And Srimati Radharani is very merciful. And you are very fortunate. Srimad Bhagavatam Grantha Raja ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Premanande.